You know that scene in The Matrix where Neo first takes the red pill? Of course you know that scene, because everybody knows that scene. He's offered a choice to stay in blissful ignorance of the digital simulation or face the harsh truth of reality. And once he's unplugged, he sees things the way they really are, and there's no going back. Well, teaching AI was a lot like that for me. I started with nothing but excitement and curiosity, wanting to share all these cutting-edge technologies and ideas with my students. And for a while that worked. I loved the experience, not just because I got to share knowledge, but because it forced me to learn and evolve alongside the fast-moving field of artificial intelligence. Just like Neo, there came to be a point where I looked around and saw that the system wasn't what I thought it was. It wasn't just about teaching anymore, it was about the underpaid work, the unpaid work, the lack of support, and the constant feeling that something was just off. It's that moment of disillusionment when you realize that something's gotta change, and that's where this all really started. Before I ever got into teaching or even technology, my life was all about stories. I used to preserve them, oral traditions from people, organization, communities. I was always finding ways to bring these stories to pen and paper to let them thrive and live on. My first real gig was as a children's entertainer, just me at a campsite, keeping kids entertained with stories to keep them glued to their seats while their parents were busy with better things. Over time, I realized that telling stories wasn't just about entertaining. It was a powerful way to share knowledge, to learn, and to connect. I carried that with me into the gaming industry when I started working for companies like Riot, EA, and ArenaNet. I was good at it. Networking, conveying ideas, and telling stories that got people behind a project, that was my passion. And that's probably why Dawngate was one of the only games I can remember to actually adopt the QA suggestions that came out from me and my team. The devs there cared about the community so much and were genuinely willing to listen to the feedback we gave, a really rare find in the industry these days. If I'm being honest though, that industry really started to wear on me. I got tired of being brought in to solve problems only to be ignored, or worse, see the game shut down because it wasn't growing fast enough. So I left that world, went to touch grass, do people things. So I went back to telling and recording stories, and for a while, I was content with that. But then 2022 hit, and suddenly AI was everywhere, and I mean everywhere. OpenAI, character AI, scale, and all sorts of things. Everywhere I turned, there was this buzz about some new system, and I was just, well, being quite frank, I was a little bit obsessed. I was deep in it with a friend, basically trying to obliterate these new systems. We turned it into a game to see how fast we could break a model or front end and get a dev to roll out some kind of hotfix so that our jailbreaks wouldn't work anymore. It was during this time that I made some serious connections and learned so much just from watching others and diving headfast into every new research paper or class that was sent my way. And eventually, I went from just wanting to break things to kind of researching how I could build with artificial intelligence instead. And that's where I came up with the idea for TTI, a text-based RPG that uses AI as a game engine. It was all about turning AI into interconnected character cards that updated based on user interactions. No more awkward human-on-human roleplay moments, just the best parts of storytelling powered by AI. And honestly, it took off a lot faster than I expected. We're still a small fish in a big pond, sure, but with 5 to 10k unique monthly players, it's nothing to laugh at. That's how I found myself teaching again in 2024, except this time I wasn't telling stories around a campfire, but instead relaying information in a virtual classroom. I started putting on seminars for a group called Gray Matter. It was supposed to just be a way to network through presentations, but before I knew it, I was running private classes, putting out research that was catching the attention of tech giants, and even beating Spotify to launch a 24/7 AI DJ. Every day was a blur of new activity and code or research, something involving AI at every single turn. And then one day, out of the blue, a college reached out to me. I won't name names, but they offered me a part-time position to teach a number of classes around artificial intelligence. They said they needed somebody to get their AI program off the ground, and I figured why not? It seemed like a great opportunity to keep sharing what I loved while learning even more. My first big job at the college was a set of spring classes meant to introduce people to artificial intelligence. Pretty straightforward, but I was very nervous. I mean, the stakes felt so high from the start. The school had a bit of a track record, apparently. They'd hired somebody before me who couldn't even get students to sign up for the class, and they had to cancel over and over as a result. The whole thing was already about to implode before I even got there. At this point, I was asked to go ahead and submit a new syllabus that could be used for the marketing team, and something seemed to click this time. Whatever I did with that syllabus and that marketing, it actually worked. I had 2 full classes signed up just like that, and there was already talk about adding in a summer class if the spring courses went well. Not bad, right? Especially for a first-timer. Now, let's talk about pay for a second. I'm no stranger to knowing what my work is worth and then freezing so I can immediately question it and undercut myself. This was a last-minute scramble for the college, and the budget wasn't exactly impressive, so I agreed to take this on for a special rate. A fraction of what I knew I should be getting, around a third of the market rate if I'm being real. But I don't have a PhD or the shiny certificates they typically look for, so I was willing to play ball for spring classes. Still, the whole time I was thinking, are they gonna regret hiring me? I mean, at this point my slides were full of AI cat pictures. I genuinely didn't know if this was going to land or if I'd be told to pack up and leave after day 1. Surprisingly though, I didn't hear a word of feedback until the very end of the semester, and even then it wasn't about my AI cats. The surveys from the students came back and I could feel myself bracing for how bad I had messed this up. But no, apparently nothing major. The only critique was that the content was a bit too advanced compared to what people had expected for an introductory course. And honestly, that was a really fair point, but overall, it went way better than I anticipated, so much so that they offered me summer classes on the spot. Now, this wasn't ideal. I'd been clear from the beginning that while I was okay with the spring rate, we'd need to reevaluate things by fall. I had good feedback, my marketing was pulling in students, and I was bringing real value to the school. Unfortunately though, for summer, it was more of the same. The same work, the same pay. But, you know, I agreed to it knowing I'd need to push for a better deal later. So I went ahead and took the same rate for summer that I took for spring. Honestly, this was my mistake even doing this. I'm sure you know as well as I do, the one big thing about teaching is that you've got to learn from your feedback. I wasn't perfect by any means, so I took that critique to heart. I dialed back the complexity for summer, I kept the sides a little bit simpler, and I started crafting customized demos for every class and made sure to provide extra resources for the folks who wanted to dive deeper. I wanted to be a better teacher, and I was willing to put in the effort. This time period drastically helped me improve my skills, and now I do custom AI demos for every class I put on. Alright, so now the summer classes have hit, and it didn't take long for the cracks to start to show. First off, my payments started to come in late, not just once, but routinely. The address is too small on the invoice, so we casually waited until the end of our contract to inform you and pay you out. In response, I had to slap harsher late fees on my invoices, but I never let that spill over into the classroom. My students didn't need to know about the chaos going on behind the scenes with the office. I wanted to keep it professional, so I kept my frustrations quiet. That was mistake number 2 on my part. Then came the weekend calls. Imagine this, it's Saturday night after 7 o'clock and my boss is ringing me up for work. Formal documents that they want me to have ready for them for the next day. It's only a syllabus for 30 classes they want an outline for. They'd need it for marketing material ASAP, and I'd be doing it for free, of course. So things escalated very quickly from me teaching one set of classes to suddenly handling the marketing for an entire AI department. And surprise, surprise, I would not be getting paid a dime for this extra work or designing over 24 classes from the ground up. But I took it on because I assumed it meant I'd be the one who'd be teaching these future classes. Spoiler alert, I would not be putting on these future classes. That is mistake number 3 on my part. By this point, I wasn't even sure if they'd call me for fall classes. Honestly, I wasn't all that hyped about it either. The constant late payments, the weekend calls, the additional and last moment work outside of my job scope, it was all taking a massive toll. It was very clear that I was undervalued, overworked, and I was f***ing over it. But you know, we're telling this story for YouTube, so if it ended there, it would just be too simple, too easy, and we would have no videos. So instead, like clockwork, the school called. Not for fall classes though. No, that would be too easy. That's where the gut punch came in. Instead, they had something else in mind. So what was the offer? Oh, it was roadshows. And if you don't know, roadshows are basically week-long conferences where I'd be teaching government officials about AI. Sounds really cool, right? 7 days out, 5 days of teaching, and the school would cover my flight and a hotel. All I have to do is put on a series of classes on machine learning and data visualization using artificial intelligence. The cherry on top of all of this was they had no one else with my level of experience lined up, so great news, they were banking on me to be there. Now, I was willing to hear them out because this sounded awesome. A state-level government conference is resume gold with expenses paid. What's not to love? I was pumped, but of course, there was a kicker. No one had said a word about the pay rate, and that was red flag number one. Naturally, I asked about the hours. 7 hours a day, he said, since that's what the school had pitched. 7 hours a day talking about AI? It's a lot of hours on a more advanced part of the field. I told them they were nuts if they thought this was a good idea. Education fatigue is a thing, and conveying high-level topics like this for an extended period of time is not an effective use of people's time and a massive strain on the presenter. It is far more typical at roadshows or conferences like this to see smaller classes with a wider variety of topics covered throughout the day by an array of presenters to help give people a break, allow them to digest knowledge, and properly prioritize the presentations most important to them. Red flag number 2. At 3, well, we should probably keep a counter going anyways. So the school immediately backtracked, saying that I can make the classes as long or as short as I wanted, but I was maxing out at 7 hours a day. Okay, cool. I can work with that. The topic though, machine learning methods and transforming data into visual representations, not my favorite thing in the world, but I could handle it. It was at this point I was informed there would be 2 other teachers also presenting at this conference and representing the school. All of us would be teaching a full load of classes through the conference. I like to think of myself as a straight shooter, so I cut to the chase and ask, what's the hourly rate? Well, you called it. They wanted to pay me the same rate as my previous contracts. So the same rate for the spring classes, the same rate for the summer classes, for more complex work on a government project. And I made it clear, like crystal clear, that we'd already had this conversation before. I had been upfront about needing a raise to match the value I brought. But no, they're not budging. So this guy, and I'll never forget this, hits me with, these government contracts are sometime awarded on the difference of just $100. I can't pay you your asking rate. Which wasn't even that extreme. I asked for a minimal bump that still kept me well below the average wages of my peers. Listen, I've been around these kinds of contracts. Some of the folks I've had the pleasure of working with have directly worked on approving similar contracts to this. So sure, the margins can get slim, but they are not that slim. It was pretty obvious at this point that I'm just being talked down to, and despite asking about recent metrics, he's magically forgotten that I attended a conference specifically on the use of AI in government just a few weeks ago. By now, I'm already starting to check out mentally because he literally couldn't ask for somebody more qualified unless he was hiring a point of contact within the military actively working on an AI project. At this point, he tries to butter me up by saying, "You know you're my first choice when it comes to AI matters." Oh really? Then why are there 2 other instructors on this thing? I ask him, straight up, and it turns out those other 2, well, they're internal hires, not contracted. So yeah, I'm definitely not the first choice. I'm not even the second. I am just the guy they call when things get tough and they need somebody with expertise to pull off this harder material so that they can go ahead and win a contract. It is at this point that I stop holding back. It was ridiculous to be offered a job, to be told I'm the first pick when I clearly wasn't, to be offered the same pay as others who were handling way less complicated material. I mean, the other teachers, great individuals, but they were literally teaching people about how to navigate front ends and how to build chatbots. You cannot tell me that that is more complex or has the same value as something like machine learning methods, transforming outputs into visualized data. These are two very, very different things. So to have my worth tossed aside and say, yeah, we recognize the value that you bring, we only want to set you on the most complex subject matters, but you're not going to get paid more for it. It was just, it was very ridiculous to me, even in the moment. So I took a deep breath, I smiled, because professionalism, right? And calmly told him it didn't look like I'd be able to assist the school this time. I wished him the best of luck finding someone else, because between you and me, he'd fucking need it, and then we ended the call. That whole time, I could feel the bitterness on the other end. The bidding for that contract was happening in the morning, and he was hoping I'd be an easy yes. I knew they wouldn't get that contract at this point. They had openly said I was the only one that they knew could do the work, and there wasn't even time to find anybody else. A big government contract for the school flushed down the drain. And honestly, I had really mixed emotions about this. I was upset. I was happy to be standing my ground, but mostly I was just mad that I had to make this choice in the first place. Between a dream notch in my resume and recognizing the value that I actually bring to the table. This is the part where I break down the math for y'all. This wasn't just about being offered the same rate for harder work, but also the sheer difference between teaching online versus in person. The lack of travel pay, the disrespect, the last minute calls, and all of it adding up. The math, there was no mathing here. For our example, we're gonna say I'm getting $100 an hour to teach because it's an easy number to work with, right? And who knows, maybe it is the actual number that I was getting paid. You don't know, I don't know, so let's keep moving on. In an ideal world, I'd teach for 8 hours in a virtual classroom. So that's 2 classes a day, 4 hours each, and walk away with a cool $800 for the day. Sometimes classes happen once a week, sometimes multiple times a week, and there are some outside factors that influence this. Regardless, this roadshow gig, it's a little different. Let's imagine, because that's what they proposed, 5 days, 7 hours of classes a day at $100 an hour. And boom, we've got $3,500 by the end of the week, which sounds really sweet. But we don't live in Fantasyland, this is real life. So first off, travel expenses. Yeah, I'm on the hook for those beyond the plane ticket and hotel room. Parking, Uber, baggage fees, there goes $200 before we've even started. Food's pricey, especially on the road, so let's say $100 a day because yay convention prices. And don't forget about the daily travel from the hotel to the conference center. We're gonna say probably another $75 just in tips and rides. Did I mention I won't actually be reimbursed for any of this until 30 days after the conference? Anyways, so now we're looking at $3,500 minus $200 minus $700 minus $375 for $2,225 for a week's worth of work. That's still not terrible, right? Well, it wouldn't be terrible if this were Fantasyland, but this is reality kicking in, so I'm not pulling 7-hour classes every day, and I've got a farm to take care of at home, which means another $100 a day for house and pet sitters. Add in the unpaid hours prepping custom material, graphics, demos, you name it, and suddenly the math is shifting. By being more realistic, 5 days, 4 hours of classes, all the added expenses, and suddenly I'm walking away with $2,000, minus $200, minus $700, minus $375, and minus an additional $700. Leaves a total of about $25, and yes, you heard that right. Less than $1 an hour for prepping and teaching. I may as well be working for free at this point. Now, of course, there is a more likely scenario. I'd skip the pet sitter by working something out with family, pull off 5 days of teaching, and net closer to $1,000 for a full week of teaching and a full week of preparation. But when you stack that up against what I'd make online teaching a class from the comfort of my home, it is a no-brainer why this offer didn't make sense without a raise. So when you add in the constant disrespect, the first choice lies, the self-marketing I had to do that no other teacher had to deal with, I was just tired. I would have gladly said yes if someone had recognized my passion, offered me something reasonable, or even met me halfway. But instead, I was crunching numbers in a meeting where everybody already knew that this was not going to fly. So I think it's safe to say that they didn't get their contract, and I wasn't surprised. I politely declined at this point any future meetings about fall classes, whether they were in person or online, until they were ready to negotiate a fairer hourly rate. I get that I don't have the same degrees or certs as my peers, but the results speak for themselves. The metrics, the feedback, the work I put in, all of that holds value that needs to be recognized, and I'm thankful to be at a point in my life where I can walk away, even though I very much wanted to stay. The more I look back on it, the more I realize that this was never about keeping me on long term. It felt like the plan all along was to replace me with internal hires once they got up to speed with their certifications. They just needed me to keep things running, to build up their marketing while they train their preferred candidates behind the scenes. All of that work I put into those materials is just gone. The benefits, I will never see them. So the question is what do I do now? Well, thankfully, that's not really a question I have to worry about. There's this running joke in my family that I'm basically Batman. I always have a plan, a backup plan, and then a backup plan to the backup plan. I've had new offers roll in from really big firms, more exciting opportunities, and my network has always really had my back. I've taken on some temporary work for a startup, I've run private AI classes, and even started a pro bono course for a STEM program aimed at young women. My support circle, the network I've spent years cultivating, they're the ones who really came through for me in all of this. The next leg of my journey was being written long before this whole debacle ever played out. The neat thing about stories is you find that's usually how they go. So what am I doing now? What's next? It's actually pretty simple. I'm taking some time off. Now that my exit interview is behind me and my side contracts are squared away, I'm turning my attention back to the TTI community and working on some new content for October. I'm embracing the end of year as a chance to finally relax, spend some time with family, and dive into the creative projects that I want to focus on. Don't get me wrong, I'm still doing YouTube videos and projects, but now I'm less beholden to the constraints of a rigid work schedule, which is pretty exciting. Every new opportunity I look at now is one where the value, whether monetary, personal, or anything else, matches the time, knowledge, and effort I bring to the table. This was not an easy choice for me to make, but I really do think it was the right one, and I'm so excited to bring you all along for the ride. Well, I'd say that about wraps up this story time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Did I make the right choice stepping away, or should I have just sucked it up and gone to the roadshow instead? Join me next time where we'll be taking a peek into some of the failed front ends and the secret fallout the AI community still experiences over them. Or, something else that floats my goat if I get bored, like 2025 AI predictions, or a look at what 2024 predictions have come true so far. I don't know, we'll figure it out. Remember to like, comment, subscribe to see this channel grow. See ya, nerds!